Hi Year 11, here is your feedback for your first assessment task. So to start off with, congratulations on having this done. I know it was a big task with the two components, and today we're going to go through both of these. A lot of the time is actually not going to be me talking, but you pausing this video so that you can complete the activities that are really around reflection. Okay, a lot of your feedback is already written on your page and it's individualized feedback. But this feedback is going to get you to really look at your own work and think about how you're going to work and improve on it before we have our next task next term. So for part A, you obviously had the hands-in component, you were given the rubric and the marking criteria. Now this question compare and contrast the quality of life between Australia and one other Asian economy is quite similar to questions that can be asked for the first unit of the HSC course. So it's something that is both skill and in terms of content relevant to where we're going for the HSC. A few quick comments based on the criteria. You were asked to compare and contrast. A lot of what we did was contrast, and we did very little similarities, which I suppose for a lot of you had lots of differences to talk about, and that was great, but there were some instances where you really could have drawn out similarities a little bit further. And a lot of the times that's probably what kept people from moving from that B range into an A range. The concepts like economic growth, employment, distribution, environmental sustainability, and the role of government, many of you talked about one or two of these really well, but probably didn't have the variety and that idea of application that would have pushed you into an A range, which is not easy to get on your first go at an economics essay, so it's completely understandable. Terms, concepts, and relationships were done fairly well. This idea of relationships was probably the hardest section to show those connections, but for the most part, they read like economics essays, so I was very, very happy with that. We then had this idea of data, figure, and evidence, and it's something that we are going to need to continue to work on. We all made a good start, okay, but there is plenty of room for improvement there. And probably the section of the criteria that I was happiest with was this section here on structure. It's all very clear. It's very clear to me that you can all write an essay, which is great. So for part A, we're going to break it up into skills and content. And the skills are more focused on how to answer questions and construct a response. And the content is rather on the what information was given. So as I said, both of these are relevant for us in the HSC. For skills, these are transferable, and these are hopefully going to be something that we build on and that we then use in the HSC. So things like integrating data and evidence to prove our economic ideas. You might want to highlight or circle that word prove. To show connections and relationships between concepts, not to look at things in isolation. At times, our writing was not clear, okay, and I would have put that there about sentence structure or the length of your sentences. So that's something that you'll need to have a look at for your own response as well. Something that I really want to draw your attention to is a topic sentence. You may have called it a point. It's the same thing. So many of us are writing a topic sentence or a point that doesn't directly link to the paragraph below it. It's something we've got to fix immediately. And if that's you in your assignment and you get that feedback, that needs to be a priority. This last idea is something that, and you might want to write here, it's an A range idea. Sophisticated ideas, coming up with things ourselves, creating these ideas and concepts ourselves and exploring them in our writing. Did you take a risk? Did you provide some information that you kind of were able to marry together yourself? You didn't read it anywhere else, but you made the connections individually. What I want you to do is I want you to now pause this video and rate how confident you are on these skills and have a think about how you want to improve these before our next assessment task. So this bit is really the practical bit. What are you going to do to improve your confidence level and your ability to write with clarity? Okay, pause and have a go at that now. All right, hopefully this is now full. If we come down to content, it's really important that we have correct, relevant, and depth. So I need 100% of the content to be accurate. I need the content given to answer the question and be relevant, and I need you to have enough depth that you've explored the issues. Most of us had these first two correct, but I think that's because it was a hand-in. Some of us lacked in this depth section where we brought up an idea that was fantastic, but then we actually ended up steering away from it after a sentence, which was a bit of a shame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each section of the criteria. Most of it's activity based, and then you will work through reading your own response. The first bit asked you to compare and contrast. I want you to pause now and reread your own response. And what you're going to do is you're going to fill in this table. What similarities did you give and what differences did you give? Okay, because many of you did not give similarities. Okay, and I want you to think about, would you change the percentage devoted to similarities? Guys, I'm not saying it should be 50-50, but I'm saying we should have at least some similarities. Okay, hopefully you've done that now. Just some general other comments on your content. Many of you did not link to quality of life and HDI indicators, and I was a little bit disappointed for the fact that this should have been the basis of your response. Life expectancy, mean years of schooling, GNI per capita. And what you should have done then is gone life expectancy. What should I link to that? Oh, government spending on healthcare. Oh, mean years of schooling. What should I link to that? Employment, industries, jobs, government spending on education. Ooh, GNI per capita. What should I link to this? Economic growth, output, employment. So these should have really driven your response, these HDI indicators, and a lot of us didn't do that, which really restricted us yet again from pushing into that A range. So have a think about that with your response. For this idea of concepts, I didn't expect you to include them all, but a lot of you got caught up on one and didn't provide enough variety. So what I want you to do is, having just reread your response, I want you to answer these questions. Yes, do it now. Pause. So you should now have circles or highlighted sections of your answers. What do your answers reveal to you? Did you have enough variety? Did you not? Did you only focus on 1 to 2 areas? Did you use this to drive your response? Okay, have a bit of a reflection on that. Okay, the next point of the criteria was about terminology, concepts, and relationships. Overall, guys, I was fairly impressed with this section, and the majority of you did this. It is important to try and in inverted commas, bump up your language, increase the sophistication. Remember, it is about application of concepts, not just referring to them. So I kind of decided that I was about here. We've still got work to do, but for our very first task, overall, I was fairly happy. Having a look at your response, I want you to try and see if you can fill this table. If you can fill this table, you've done a great job, okay? If you've got gaps in this table, maybe you didn't provide enough economic terms and concepts. So have a go now, flick through your first 1 or 2 pages and write down the relevant terms and concepts you use that are SST, okay? Once you've filled this in, and you might need to pause now to do that, once you've filled this in, rate yourself. Where are you sitting? How happy are you with your use of subject-specific terms and concepts? And did you really do this last bit, which is the complex bit about relationships? Have a little bit of a think about that now. Okay, the next part of the criteria was to look at data, figures, extensive, relevant. It is key. This is the bread and butter of economics. If you can't prove it, don't state it, okay? It's not English. It is important not just to mention the data though, but to draw meaning from it. So many of you gave me a paragraph and you elaborated and you gave me content and then you put the data as the last sentence. As a point of instruction, never put your data as the last sentence. Your data should come early in the paragraph so that you can explore it, so that you can elaborate on the effect, so you can make a judgment on extent, okay? The first thing I want you to think about is how much data did you provide? Did you provide little to no data, or did you provide data in all sections? Once you've done that, I want you to think about, did you draw meaning from your data? Did you say, well, this data proves that? This data shows this. This data clearly gives an example of. Or did you just mention the data? My other question for you to consider for this section is how effective was your data? Did it show similarities and differences? So did you use comparative data, or was it rather data that just was stated and didn't have any point of comparison between your country and the other? Pause now and have a go at these three little activities for data and figures. Okay, last section of the criteria for part 1. Guys, I said to you, overall, I think this was our strongest section. Our whole text structure was great. You all had an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. With the introduction, guys, a point you might want to make a comment. It's really important that this outlines the response. I need to know the two countries, what are your economic concepts you're dealing with, and maybe even a clear thesis or a judgment statement in the intro. Your paragraph structure was okay. It wasn't phenomenal. This really should be our primary focus as we move forward. I've already spoken about this role of the topic sentence, and for many of you, this needs to be a priority. On this section with elaboration and evidence, you might want to annotate here that it is important that the evidence is explored, meaning your data, your figures, may need to come earlier in the paragraph for future responses. Now, the role of a link. The linking sentence, the last sentence of a paragraph, can have two roles. The first role is to sum up that paragraph and link to the question. The second role that sentence can play is to sum up that paragraph, but to link to the paragraph that is going to follow it. So it creates a bit of a bridge between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. This second role of the link is actually a little bit more complex to do, but when done well, it really helps to increase the sophistication of your response. Sentence level, fairly good. One thing I will say is we need to be careful that our sentences are not getting too long. I will ask you now to have a look in your response about simple sentences. This means a sentence with one idea. Okay, Australia has a high quality of life due to high levels of economic growth. Simple sentence. Okay, when you think about complex sentences, this is where you're trying to relate two different ideas. Australia's high quality of life is due to a number of factors which include low unemployment. This is as a result of a strong educational sector. You've connected ideas. In a response, guys, you need simple sentences. They can't all be complex. If they're all complex, it is way too hard to read. So you really need to think about the balance between simple and complex. Have a look at your own work now. Okay, section 2, which was your multiple choice. Guys, overall, I was extremely happy with the results for this, okay? It was the first time you'd done an exam style conditions for economics. I didn't think that the questions were overly complex. I tried to keep them straightforward and achievable, but obviously there were a couple of tricky ones in there. How confident did you feel before you walked in? Circle a number. What made you feel that way? You really need to think, if you're down at a 1 to a 4, why did you not feel confident? Was it because it was the very first time? Was it a lack of preparation? Was it that you hadn't sought out extra help? Really think, okay, about 1, what influenced your confidence in a positive way, and 2, what hindered your confidence. Once you've filled in those 2 sections, you might need to pause. Would you change anything about your preparation? Would you study earlier? Would you study differently? Would you do more practice questions? What would you do differently when preparing for future tasks? Because remember, multiple choice will be in the HSC and it will come up later on in prelim as well. So I introduced you to this concept of economic reasoning. It's about this idea of it being a thinking process that requires you to remember, apply, and eliminate as well as prove. How do you think you did this? Poor, fair, good, very good, excellent. Looking at your multiple choice papers which are in front of you, how much did you actually write on the paper? Did you put this economic reasoning onto the paper? Yes? Or very little? If you have very little or moderate, do you think that this impacted your mark? If you did annotate, do you think that helped your mark? Okay, see if there's a correlation between your annotations and your marks. All right, what you need to do now is you need to have a look through each of these questions. And what I've done is I've put these questions and really the concepts that I was assessing. So question 1 was about a calculation. Question 2 was about a recession and unemployment. Question 3 was about substitute goods. And all of us got these right. Did your selections match the class trends? So if we have a look down here, question 9, okay, was fairly poorly done. Okay, it was an application question, which made it a little bit more complex. But why do you think most of us got this wrong? And if you did get it right, what did you do to get it right? Question 15 and 16 were, as a class, our most poorly answered questions. And this one here, I think, was a question that really tested your not just content knowledge, but your thinking knowledge. And this idea here about labor and capital substitution, and this idea about relative cost, really asks you to think about something that you may not have had notes on. And these are economic style multiple choice. You are not going to know the answer, okay, when it comes time for the HSC, but you are going to have to figure out the answer. So what you need to do in here is, does your selection match the class trend? If you did get it wrong, why did you get it wrong? Yeah, you really need to go back and look at what option you picked, what was the correct answer, and why you got it wrong. Did you not know the content? Did you misinterpret the question? You need to figure that out on an individual question level. So this is going to take you a little while. Okay, hopefully you've now filled in all of this and you've reflected on your multiple choice. Guys, overall, I think we've made a fantastic start to economics, and I can see that everyone's put in a lot of effort, okay, and has made a considerable amount, has given a considerable amount of time to the preparation for this first task. So I want you to circle or highlight what face kind of links to how you feel you've gone with this task. Now remember, we can be excited, we can be disappointed. All of these are normal emotions with assessment tasks. But if you have noticed, I have not mentioned a mark in this feedback at all, because the mark is the least valuable thing. The mark is the least valuable in helping us to improve. What helps us to improve is looking at our own work, looking at what was expected of us, and figuring out how we're going to improve on it for next time, not just looking at the numbers. All right, guys, your sheet should now be full, and good job on your first assessment task.